In the middle of a grand ballroom, where music echoed and chandeliers sparkled, stood a little boy, Rowan, the millionaire's son. Dressed in a sky-blue suit and kid's tie, he looked perfect on the outside, but inside he carried the weight of every laugh and every cruel whisper. No one wanted to dance with him. No one wanted to see his gentle heart. But then, something unexpected happened. A poor little girl named Penelope, wearing a simple pale dress, walked up to him. She didn't laugh. She didn't turn away. She smiled. And when she invited him to dance, the whole room froze. At a distance, the powerful millionaire Charles stood watching, his figure blurred by the lights, but in his chest his heart pounded with pride, pain, and hope. For that night, in the innocence of two children, a story began. A story of courage, kindness, and a lesson America's heart still needs to hear. The ballroom glowed with golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung above like frozen stars, each one scattering tiny sparkles across the polished marble floor. Music drifted softly through the air, violins playing a tune that seemed made for a perfect night. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns moved gracefully, their laughter floating like bubbles. Tables with shining silver dishes stood at the edges of the hall, and everywhere smelled of roses and expensive perfumes. But in the middle of this glittering world stood a small boy, Rowan, just 6 years old. He wore a neat sky-blue suit, carefully pressed by his father's staff, and a tiny tie that matched. On the outside, he looked like the perfect young prince. Yet his hands trembled. His big blue eyes darted nervously around the room. He could hear the violins, but he couldn't feel the rhythm in his feet. He didn't know how to dance. The music grew louder. More children filled the floor. Little girls spun in puffy dresses. Little boys stepped and twirled with confidence. Rowan stood frozen, his small shoes glued to the floor. A group of children noticed. They whispered, then giggled. "Why isn't he dancing?" one boy said, smirking. "Doesn't the millionaire's son know even one step?" a girl laughed, covering her mouth. Rowan's cheeks burned. His fingers twisted nervously with the edge of his jacket. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the polished floor. But he couldn't move. His fear was stronger than his feet. The laughter grew louder. More children pointed. Some even danced exaggeratedly near him, mocking his stiffness. Every giggle felt like a knife in Rowan's heart. Above it all, his father, Charles, stood watching. The billionaire, powerful and respected by all, suddenly felt powerless. He had given his son everything: money, clothes, security. But in this moment, Rowan looked like the loneliest child in the world. The chandeliers sparkled, the violins sang, and the dancers twirled. Yet for Rowan, the ballroom was nothing but a prison of whispers and laughter. He lowered his head. His little hands clenched. His small heart ached. For the first time, he wished he wasn't the son of a rich man, because all the wealth in the world couldn't protect him from the cruel laughter of other children. And somewhere deep inside him, a question echoed like thunder. Would anyone ever stand by me? Would anyone ever see me as more than just the millionaire's son? The night was just beginning. But for Rowan, it already felt like it was breaking him apart. Charles stood near the stage, his tall frame commanding the space, yet inside he felt small. His dark tailored suit fit perfectly, his cufflinks shone like diamonds, but his eyes were fixed only on his son. Rowan, his little boy, the one he had promised to protect from every storm in life, the one he thought his wealth could shield from all pain. But now, in front of his very eyes, Rowan was being crushed, not by poverty, not by hunger, but by laughter. Charles's chest tightened as he saw Rowan's hands tremble. The boy's lips pressed together, his eyes glossy with unshed tears. He wasn't dancing. He wasn't smiling. He was shrinking, fading, trying to hide in the middle of a shining ballroom. The children's giggles sliced through the music. Their mocking whispers twisted like knives in Charles's ears. He wanted to step forward, to silence them all with the power of his presence. One glare from him could stop grown men. But tonight, it wasn't about business. It wasn't about power. It was about his son's fragile little heart. Charles clenched his jaw. He had built skyscrapers, signed billion-dollar contracts, defeated ruthless rivals. Yet here, watching his 6-year-old struggle, he felt powerless. His heart screamed to step in, but another voice whispered, "If you save him now, will he ever learn to stand tall on his own?" He saw Rowan lower his head, and it broke him. Memories flashed before Charles's eyes, Rowan's first steps, his first laugh, the way he used to cling to his father's finger as a baby. And now, at just 6 years old, the boy looked like he was carrying the weight of the whole world. Charles's hands curled into fists. His throat ached with unspoken words. He wanted to shout, "Leave my son alone!" But pride and pain locked his lips shut. He remembered his own childhood, how his father, a cold and distant man, never stood by him, how he had grown strong, but also lonely. And now, watching Rowan suffer in silence, Charles wondered with dread, "Am I becoming like my father?" The ballroom glittered, the music soared, the laughter of strangers echoed. But Charles's world narrowed down to one small boy standing in a sky-blue suit, lost and broken. For a moment, Charles thought his son might burst into tears. He leaned forward, ready to rush across the room. But then Rowan swallowed hard, holding back his tears. His small fists clenched at his sides. His bravery was breaking his father's heart. Charles's eyes burned. He had never cried in front of anyone. Not in boardrooms, not in battles, not even in loss. But tonight, he was close. He realized that money could build castles, but it could not build courage inside a child's heart. And so, Charles stood still, silent, aching, hoping, praying that someone might appear to save his boy from this cruel storm. The billionaire, admired by all, was just a father in pain, and the night was not done testing him. Just as the whispers and giggles grew louder, the grand ballroom doors opened with a quiet creak. Few people noticed at first. The chandeliers still glowed, the violins still sang, and laughter still carried through the air. But through that open door stepped a little girl whose presence would change everything. Penelope. She was only 6 years old. Her hair tied back with a ribbon that had been used so many times it was frayed at the edges. Her dress was simple, pale pink cotton, not silk, not satin, not glittering like the others. The hem was slightly worn, the fabric soft from many washes. Compared to the shiny gowns of the other girls, Penelope looked out of place. But her eyes, her bright, gentle eyes, shone with a light stronger than any jewel in the room. She paused at the doorway, clutching the little teddy bear charm bracelet on her wrist, the only precious thing she owned. The other children twirled across the dance floor, laughter bouncing like arrows, but her gaze went straight to the boy in the sky-blue suit. Rowan. She saw the way his shoulders slumped. She saw the red in his cheeks, the way he fought back tears, the way his little fists trembled. And though she didn't know him, her heart felt heavy for him, because Penelope knew what it was like to be laughed at. She knew what it was like to be left out, to be whispered about for being different, for being poor. She had carried that ache many times, and she could not stand to see it in someone else's eyes. Without hesitation, Penelope walked forward. Her shoes were plain, but each step was steady, determined. The crowd of children parted slightly as she moved, some frowning in confusion, others giggling again. But she didn't stop. Rowan looked up, startled as the little girl approached him. For a moment, his heart pounded. Was she coming to laugh at him too? But then he saw her smile. A small, warm, fearless smile. She stopped right in front of him, and for a second, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. She didn't laugh. She didn't whisper. She simply stretched out her tiny hand, palm open, fingers waiting. Her voice, soft yet strong, broke through the music. "Do you want to dance with me?" The words were simple, but to Rowan they were magic. The children who had mocked him fell silent, their curiosity sparking. The adults nearby turned their heads, wondering at the sight. And Charles, standing near the stage, leaned forward, his breath catching in his chest. Penelope's hand remained steady, her eyes never wavering. She wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, but in that moment she was braver than anyone else in the ballroom. And Rowan, with his little heart pounding, felt something he hadn't felt all night. Hope. Rowan stared at Penelope's outstretched hand. His small chest rose and fell quickly, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Not with kindness, not with patience, not with courage. He hesitated. His hand trembled at his side. What if he tripped? What if everyone laughed harder? What if this girl changed her mind and mocked him too? But then his eyes met hers. Penelope's gaze was steady, shining with a warmth that seemed to say, "I'm not here to laugh at you. I'm here to stand with you." Slowly, nervously, Rowan lifted his little hand and placed it into hers. His palm was clammy, but her touch was soft and sure. A small gasp echoed in the crowd. Some children tilted their heads, confused, while others whispered louder. The violins continued to play. The rhythm called them to move. Penelope leaned closer and whispered gently, "It's easy. Just follow me." She took a careful step to the left, pulling Rowan's hand with hers. He stumbled, his shoe scraping against the polished floor. A few giggles rang out, sharp as glass. Rowan's face burned. He wanted to stop. But Penelope didn't let go. She gave his hand a light squeeze and smiled again, whispering, "You're doing fine. Just one step at a time." Rowan swallowed hard and tried again. Left, right, left. His movements were stiff, but Penelope's giggles, soft, sweet, encouraging, began to melt the fear inside him. "See, you're already dancing," she whispered. His lips parted in surprise. He was. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't graceful. But it was dancing. The children who had laughed earlier fell into silence. One by one, they stopped mocking, their eyes wide as Rowan slowly began to find the rhythm. The sight was something none of them expected. Rowan's steps grew steadier. Penelope spun lightly, her ribbon fluttering, and Rowan tried to copy her. He stumbled again, but this time he laughed, a shaky, nervous laugh that made Penelope laugh too. And that laugh was louder than any whisper. Soon the ballroom began to shift. The adults, who had been sipping wine and watching from a distance, leaned closer. The musicians exchanged glances, playing a little softer, as if they too were captured by the moment. Charles's throat tightened. His son, his boy who had been mocked only minutes ago, was now smiling, dancing, shining. And it wasn't because of wealth or lessons or power. It was because one brave little girl had chosen kindness over cruelty. By now the crowd was hushed. The only sounds were the violins, the gentle footsteps of two small children, and the laughter that carried no mockery, only joy. When the song finally ended, Rowan bowed clumsily, copying what he'd seen grown men do. Penelope giggled and curtsied back. The room erupted into applause, but Rowan's eyes were only on Penelope. For the first time that night, he felt proud. Not because he was the millionaire's son, not because of his sky-blue suit, but because someone had believed in him. And that gave him courage. The whispers had stopped, the laughter had vanished, and in its place was silence filled with respect. The music had not truly stopped, but in that moment, it felt like the whole world had. Charles had never taken his eyes off his son. From the very first moment Rowan froze on the dance floor, to the cruel laughter that cut him down, to the magical second Penelope took his hand, Charles had seen it all. And now, as the applause filled the grand ballroom, something inside him shifted forever. His throat tightened as he watched Rowan's clumsy bow and Penelope's playful curtsy. The sight of his son smiling, a real free smile, not forced, not hidden, was almost too much for him. His chest swelled with pride, but also with shame. Because in that moment, Charles realized the truth. All his billions, all his power, all his polished chandeliers and glittering parties, none of it had given his son what he needed most. Love, courage, friendship. Charles's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of a chair to steady himself. Memories rushed through his mind. Late nights at the office, missed birthdays, quick goodbyes, promises to make it up later. He thought money would fill every gap, but tonight, in front of everyone, he saw just how wrong he had been. His little boy didn't need a ballroom. He didn't need a sky-blue suit or shiny shoes. He needed someone to believe in him. And it hadn't been Charles. It had been Penelope. Tears burned in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they came stronger. He remembered his own father, cold, distant, never there when Charles had needed him. He had promised himself he would be different. And yet, here he was, repeating the same mistake. But then, Rowan's laughter rang across the hall. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, it was pure, childlike joy. And it pierced through Charles's guilt like sunlight through storm clouds. The billionaire dropped to one knee as Rowan and Penelope came off the floor. His tall, strong figure bent low, humbling himself before two children. The room hushed at the sight. Charles placed a hand on Rowan's small shoulder, his voice breaking. "Son, I am so proud of you." His eyes flickered to Penelope, shining with gratitude. "And thank you, Penelope. You gave him what I could not. You gave him courage." Penelope's cheeks flushed pink, but she smiled shyly. "He just needed a friend," she said softly. Charles's heart clenched. Such simple words, such powerful truth. He looked back at Rowan, cupping his little face. "Never forget this, my boy. Wealth and power mean nothing without kindness. And sometimes the smallest hand can lift us higher than all the riches in the world." Rowan threw his arms around his father's neck, whispering in a trembling voice, "I wasn't afraid when she was with me, Daddy." Charles hugged him tightly, closing his eyes. For once, the man who could buy anything in the world felt richer than he ever had, because tonight he had learned the value of something priceless. The lesson struck not just him, but everyone in that ballroom. Grown men and women who had come for glitter and gold now stood silent, moved by the courage of two children and the humility of a father. And Charles knew this was the moment that would shape his son's heart forever. The ballroom still glowed with golden light, but something had changed. The chandeliers, the music, the polished marble, none of it mattered anymore. What everyone carried in their hearts now was far brighter than jewels, the image of two children showing the meaning of courage and kindness. Rowan stood between his father and Penelope. His sky-blue suit still looked elegant, but for the first time, it didn't feel heavy on him. He no longer felt like just the millionaire's son. He felt like himself, a boy who had found bravery because someone had believed in him. Penelope held her teddy bear charm bracelet, her small eyes shining with quiet pride. She hadn't cared that her dress was plain. She hadn't cared that she was poor, standing among the rich. All she had cared about was the lonely boy who needed a friend. And her small act of kindness had changed everything. Charles rose to his full height, still holding Rowan's hand. He turned to the crowd, his voice strong yet tender. "Tonight was meant to be about wealth and charity, but my son and this brave little girl have taught us something far greater. Money can buy chandeliers, ballrooms, and music, but it cannot buy what matters most: courage, kindness, and friendship." A hush swept the hall. Some adults shifted uncomfortably, realizing how easily they had forgotten such truths. Others lowered their eyes, ashamed of the way they had laughed along with the children. But Charles's words didn't stop there. He rested his hand on Penelope's small shoulder. "Never overlook the quiet ones, the poor ones, the ones you think have nothing. Sometimes they carry treasures no money can measure. Tonight, this little girl reminded us all what true wealth really is. Penelope looked up at him, her cheeks pink. Rowan squeezed her hand tightly, whispering, "You're my best dance partner forever." The crowd softened. Some clapped. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The music, which had once been just background noise, now felt like a gentle hymn to the lesson that filled the room. As the evening went on, no one whispered cruelly about Rowan again. Children who had mocked him earlier came forward, shyly asking if he would teach them the steps Penelope had shown him. And for the first time, Rowan felt not mocked, but admired. Charles watched with tears in his eyes, silently promising himself that he would never again let his son stand alone in a storm of laughter. He had learned that true fatherhood was not about giving riches, but about standing beside your child with love. By the time the night ended, the ballroom wasn't remembered for the glitter, the food, or the music. It was remembered for the dance of two children, one rich, one poor, who had shown an entire room that kindness is more powerful than wealth. As they left the hall, Charles whispered to Rowan, "Remember, son, the greatest people are not the richest, but the kindest." Rowan nodded, his small hand still holding Penelope's. And in that moment, Charles knew his son's heart would grow into something the world truly needed. Not just another millionaire, but a man who valued love above all. Do not measure worth by money or status. A poor child's kindness can outshine the richest jewels. And laughter used to mock can wound deeply, but a single hand of friendship can heal it all.